this sort of combination of freedom and sadness of leaving your home. A strange combination, but I think that the freedom succeeded more than the sadness. I was not homesick. None of us were really homesick, a few people. But to look forward to that new life. And the group became actually the family. Do you understand? It's not like I left my father and mother. I suddenly was with a lot of fathers and mothers, young fathers and mothers. And the people who took care of us in the kibbutz were actually also fathers and mothers, teachers, instructors. We were very lucky. When we were in Palestine, it was such a wonderful experience to be in our own land, in a wonderful climate, on a land, on a ate the produce from we were working in the morning on the fields, and in the afternoon we were studying agriculture, and we were half boys and half girls. We were in love, we were singing, we were dancing, we were free, and we were not, and Nazism was far away. Later on, when I joined the army, we heard what happened in Germany, but much, much, much later. Even during the 1939, 40, 41, we didn't know. We knew that Hitler started a war, that the British, since Palestine was a British colony, quasi-colony, but we never realized that horror. Only much later we found out what happened in Germany. But meanwhile, we were a happy group of young people, enjoying our free life. We were listening to wonderful music. My great experience was the first time I could actually listen to a composer named Mendelssohn, because Mendelssohn was forbidden in Germany. When I heard the violin concerto for the first time, it was to me always a revelation how great it was. Of course, we were then 15, 16 years old. It was always nice when a young, beautiful girl sits next to you, and we can be on the dashe. In Hebrew that means on the lawn. And it's night when there's a moonlight. It sounds very corny, but it's true. When there's a moonshine and the palm in the wind, you hear a little bit the sounds of the palms in the wind. And then we're listening to a Beethoven sonata. You know, I mean, it's incredible. One has to experience oneself to know what it means. But then we had to go about, like, after we had breakfast, out to the fields in a wagon, who would then feed the people who work in the fields, you see? And it was a wonderful feeling. I remember when I went over there, I could eat then about like 6, 8 eggs at the same time, drink, I don't know how much milk and how much bread I could eat. And then we went to the Chorsha at the Mayan Chorot, and I still remember how wonderful it was to lie there for a little while in that beautiful, cool, because you know it was very hot, but this was like an oasis. It was incredible. And then take the wagon and drive the horses back again. We had a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful time. We also had a lot of responsibilities. We had, for instance, committees. We were in charge. I was, for instance, in charge about sports. I organized sports events. We almost had little Olympic things between 2 or 3 different kibbutzim where we met, and I really enjoyed doing that. In fact, when I left the kibbutz, I wanted to become a sport teacher. I had 2 interests, music and sports. When I came to Palestine, I knew already a little bit to play the piano. I taught on my own. And then I got very interested in reading piano music. I learned by myself. I was an autodidact reading music. So the first thing I did, I would take the piano sonatas, or I would take the symphonies or overtures, a library which I took from Germany with me to Palestine, and I would sit sometimes after work, after studies in the evening, go to the piano and play all these wonderful melodies of Schubert, Mendelssohn, overtures, light classical music, waltzes by Strauss. This is how I got to learn how to play the piano, actually. When I was playing the piano, the girls were sitting around me, enjoyed I did something what my father did 20 years ago. Before that, you know, I emulated my father in the kibbutz with the other young girls. I didn't know it at the time, but now when I look back, I did exactly the same. In the other experience I had too, I was not a dancer because they always used me to play the accordion when they were dancing the horror. See, there was no rock. We were dancing the horror or folk dances, the debka, the horror, the polka. These were our rock dancing today, you know. There was no cigarette smoking. There were no drugs. In fact, we were forced to live healthily. Why? Because during the war, you couldn't get sugar. You couldn't get, the only thing that we had actually is to take the fruits from the earth. We had our own potatoes, and it was also very good because it was done all organically. Not because we didn't have money to use that chemical stuff to grow it faster. So we used all our organic stuff from the cows, so we lived healthily by default, as we can say. You know? It's amazing when I think back the way we lived at the time. Our kibbutz was rather big. We had about like 80 cows, you know, the milk cows, of course. And then we had about like, I don't know how many, 3,000 chickens who were laying eggs. And there were about, in this kibbutz where I was, there were about like close to 800 members. So it was rather one of the big ones. They would teach us Hebrew, they would teach us the Bible. But the interesting thing is, it was not a religious kibbutz. It was a sort of a labor Zionist movement. Sort of, if you would call it today, you would call it a liberal on the left side. We were all workers, and we wear blue shirts. And so when the Bible was taught to us, the Bible was taught to us like more like a social document, not like a religious document. Sometimes when I think the most wonderful time I had, it was actually living in a kibbutz. The only thing what I wanted to do was become much more important than living in a kibbutz was to be a musician. The kibbutz wouldn't let me to study music because I was more important to be on the field. So I decided then to leave the kibbutz after the 2 years of preparation, which was paid for me by the women's organization here in America, Hadassah. But 50 years, my 50th anniversary, when I went back to Israel and I went to the kibbutz, and I look at some of those people who got old, and I said to myself, they never have to worry anymore about old age because this was all taken care of. When you live in a kibbutz and after about 20 or 30 years when you become older, you can live as an old person, you have the same thing, you don't have to worry about old age or medication, everything is taken care of from you. The only thing you may lose is your own individual ideas, what you want to do with your life. You have to be a part of the group. I could never be part of the group completely. Although I sometimes look back and I said, yeah, if I would have been married probably happily, I could have probably lived the kibbutz the rest of my life as long as I could exercise my musical talent. But fate, my karma was not there.